What's the oldest story ever told? You might think it's the pyramids in Egypt, or maybe Stonehenge in England. But what if I told you the greatest, most ancient human story isn't written in stone, but in blood and sand on a continent at the very edge of the world? We're talking about the Australian Aboriginal origins, a story that stretches back an almost unbelievable 65,000 years. Forget everything you think you know about Stone Age people. How did a small group of humans cross 100 kilometers of open ocean 50,000 years before the Vikings? How did they navigate without a compass and settle a continent filled with giant killer kangaroos? And how do we know for a fact that their culture is the oldest continuous living culture on planet Earth? The answers are locked away in ancient DNA, buried in forgotten caves, and hidden in plain sight. In this video, we are going to unravel one of the greatest migrations in human history. So stick around, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you see the human story. All right, let's set the scene. Forget the world you know. I want you to picture the Earth 70,000 years ago. It's the middle of the last ice age, so much of the world's water is locked up in massive ice sheets that sea levels are like 150 meters lower than they are today. Coastlines are totally different. Britain is connected to Europe. Alaska is connected to Siberia. And down south, Australia wasn't an island. It was part of the massive supercontinent that scientists call Sahul. It connected modern-day Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania into one single gigantic landmass. Now, this place was straight out of a fantasy novel. Sahul was home to megafauna. We're talking giant 2-meter-tall kangaroos that were carnivores, wombats the size of a rhinoceros, a lizard that was 7 meters long, and basically a real-life dragon. It was a wild alien world. And here's the kicker. There wasn't a single human being on it. The entire continent was empty. A ghost continent waiting for its first footsteps. So this begs the question. If people weren't there, where did the first Australians come from? And more importantly, how in the world did they get there? The story we've all been told is that modern humans first left Africa around 70,000 years ago and spread across the globe. They walked into Asia, then into Europe. But to get to Sahul, you had a problem, a big one. Even with sea levels at their lowest, there was always a massive stretch of open ocean separating Asia from Sahul. This deep-water trench, known today as the Wallace Line, is a biological barrier that has existed for millions of years. Animals from Asia, like tigers and monkeys, never made it across, and Australian animals, like kangaroos and koalas, never made it out. It's a real invisible line in the ocean that splits two different worlds. So, if huge animals couldn't even cross this barrier over millions of years, how did people do it 65,000 years ago? They didn't have Viking long ships, they didn't have maps, they didn't even know a giant continent was waiting for them on the other side. This wasn't a casual trip across a river, this was blue water voyage into the complete unknown. It seems impossible. So, what really happened? Look, this is the kind of story we live for on this channel. The history they don't teach you in school. We dive into these incredible, forgotten chapters of the human story to show just how clever and resilient our ancestors were. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. It's a tiny click for you, but it lets us keep digging up these amazing truths. Thanks, you're awesome. Now, back to the mystery. So, how do you solve a 65,000-year-old mystery? You follow the clues, and the first clues aren't stone tools or bones. They're stories. Aboriginal cultures have the oldest oral traditions on the planet. For generations, elders have passed down stories that speak of a time when the sea levels were much lower. They talk about hunting grounds and sacred sites that are now completely underwater. For centuries, people just dismissed these as myths, creation myths. But then modern science came along and mapped the ocean floor. And you know what they found? The submerged coastlines described in these ancient stories were real. Some of these oral histories accurately describe landscapes that haven't been seen by human eyes for over 7,000 years. Think about that. A story passed down perfectly from person to person for 300 generations. It's a verbal time capsule. But okay, stories are one thing. They're powerful, but a skeptic will always ask, where's the hard physical evidence? Where's the archaeological proof? For that, we have to travel to a place called Madjedbebe. It's a rock shelter in Arnhem Land in Australia's Northern Territory. For decades, archaeologists knew this place was old, but they had no idea how old. Then, in 2017, a team of researchers using the latest dating technology dug deeper than anyone ever had before. And what they found, it just completely shattered everything we thought we knew about human history. They found stone axes still sharp enough to use. They found seed grinding tools, which means these people were basically the world's first bakers. And they found chunks of ochre used as paint, essentially ancient crayons. When they dated the layer of sand these artifacts were buried in, the number that came back was 65,000 years. Let me put that in perspective for you. That is 20,000 years before the first modern humans are thought to have reached Europe. It means that while our ancestors in Europe were still struggling against Neanderthals, people in Australia were already settled with a sophisticated toolkit making art. It's a total rewrite of the human story. But this just raises another huge question. Okay, so people were there 65,000 years ago, but were they the same people? Are they the direct ancestors of today's Aboriginal Australians? Or were they some other group that just died out and was replaced later? This is where the most powerful clue of all comes in: DNA. In 2016, scientists undertook the most comprehensive genetic study of Aboriginal Australians ever. They worked with elders and communities to analyze the DNA from over 80 different Aboriginal groups across the continent. They were looking for a genetic signature, a breadcrumb trail leading back through time. And the results were breathtaking. The study proved beyond any doubt that virtually all Aboriginal Australians are the descendants of a single founding population that swept onto the continent all that time ago. It's an unbroken genetic line, a continuous thread of life stretching from the present day all the way back to that first landing 65,000 years ago. This makes Aboriginal Australian culture officially the oldest continuous civilization on Earth. Period. Okay, so now we have the win, 65,000 years, and the who, a single founding group. The evidence is rock solid. But this just makes the how even more insane. How did they pull it off? This wasn't an accident. You can't accidentally drift across 100 kilometers of open ocean with enough people, enough food, and enough water to start a new civilization. This had to be planned. The most likely theory is that they were expert mariners who used a technique called island hopping. They weren't just sailing blindly into the vast blue ocean. Using the islands of present-day Indonesia as stepping stones, they would have navigated from one visible island to the next. But here's what's so incredible. To see the next island, they couldn't just stand on the beach. They would have had to climb the highest mountain or hill to spot the next piece of land on the horizon. They would have needed a deep understanding of currents, winds, and how to build sturdy seafaring vessels, most likely sophisticated rafts made of bamboo. These weren't primitives clinging to a log. These were the world's first true maritime explorers. But even with island hopping, there were gaps. At least one of the voyages would have been nearly 100 kilometers long, a journey that would have taken several days, completely out of sight of land. It's a terrifying prospect. How many people would have had to make it for the population to be viable? And what happened to them when they finally set foot on this strange new continent filled with monsters? So let's picture that moment. After days at sea, on a fragile raft, you see it, a new coastline. You and a few dozen of your people finally step ashore. You are the first humans to ever set foot on the continent of Sahul. The air is different, the plants are strange, and the animals are giants. You have arrived. This is the climax of the story. All the pieces of the puzzle we've talked about, the ancient stories, the stone tools from Madjedbebe, the genetic proof, they all point to this one incredible moment. We now know this wasn't just a handful of people. Genetic models suggest that the founding population had to be at least 150 to 300 people to avoid inbreeding and to be able to successfully spread out. They didn't just survive the journey, they arrived ready to thrive. And here's the final mind-blowing piece of the puzzle. From that small founding group, they exploded across the continent with incredible speed. Within just a few thousand years, they had populated every corner of Sahul, from the tropical rainforests of the north to the freezing highlands of Tasmania in the south, and even across the vast, brutal deserts of the center. They adapted and innovated in ways that are hard to even comprehend. They became masters of the most hostile inhabited continent on the planet. This entire epic, this 65,000-year-old story, is the ultimate testament to human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. It forces us to completely reevaluate what we mean by the word primitive or simple. The people who made this journey were not grunting cavemen. They were brilliant navigators, innovative toolmakers, resilient survivors, and the founders of a deep, complex culture that has endured for over 65 centuries. Their story isn't just Aboriginal history. It's a fundamental chapter in the story of all of us. It's proof of what humans are capable of. It's a story of survival against impossible odds, of connection to country that is deeper than we can imagine, and of a flame that has never been extinguished. The greatest story ever told isn't about building pyramids of stone. It's about building a civilization of the spirit, one that can last for 65,000 years and is still going strong today. What part of this 65,000-year-old epic blew your mind the most? For me, it's the fact that their oral stories were proven true by science. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more deep dives into the hidden parts of our history, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.